Guten Tag, ich heiße Adam Stumpf, ich bin ein amerikanischer Pastor nach Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Das war für meine deutsche Zuschauer. Hi, I'm Adam Stump. That was for my German friends out there who might be watching. I have had the privilege, the honor of knowing many German people and actually having German friends and friends who have moved to Germany, and I have loved all of them and getting to know all of them and hearing and understanding their perspective on world affairs. I'm going to be speaking today about a German, and that German became famous after World War II, although he played several key roles during World War II and leading up to World War II. And that is none other than Martin Niemoller. Now, Martin Niemoller was a German clergyman who wrote a very famous poem called First They Came. And the text of the poem goes something like this. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Now, that poem obviously speaks to the systematic persecution of the Nazis in Germany during the 20s and 30s and 40s. And many of us think of the Nazi persecution, the final solution, the concentration camps and the Holocaust, which was obviously terrible. What a lot of people don't realize is the Nazis went after other groups of people as well. Anyone that they viewed was not desirable in society. Anyone who maybe was a political opponent or dissident, anybody who, did not have a lifestyle that they liked, like the gypsies, alcoholics, homeless, mentally ill, homosexuals, you name it. If you didn't fall in line with their ideology or what they thought should be your pedigree, they would throw you in prison. And then, of course, the prisons turned into concentration camps and death camps. So Niemoller was actually originally a supporter of Nazism, and there's many reasons for that. He was a U-boat commander in the German Navy during World War I. He was actually the son of a pastor, but he joined the German Navy during World War I, and he was deeply patriotic, deeply nationalist. He felt like that was the right thing to do, that there was a strong national heritage of defending Germany against the world, and that Germany was owed a lot by the world. And his nationalism ran so deep that after the armistice, the end of World War I, the functional end of World War I, all the German U-boat commanders were told to surrender their U-boats to England, and Niemoller, along with many others, refused. And so when he refused, they kicked him out of the German Navy. So after he was kicked out of the Navy, he was like, what am I going to do? And he thought, maybe I'll follow in dear old dad's footsteps. And he went to seminary to become a pastor. And it's really interesting because after he started preaching, his sermons were very nationalistic. He had a strong sense of national allegiance from the pulpit to Germany. And he and others like him felt that the reparations, which Germany had to pay after World War I, democracy, foreign influence, the emphasis of the individual over the collective or over the whole, that it had created a lot of fragmentation in German society and in German culture. And Niemoller, like others of his time, actually believed that what Germany needed was a strong, centralized leadership, sort of like another monarch. He did not like the Weimar Republic. He thought that that was just horrible, and it was an impotent system that was not befitting of Germany's glory. So when Adolf Hitler came around and the Nazi Party came around, Niemoller actually supported them, and he liked what they had to say, and he actually voted for them in the 1924 Prussian elections and also the final elections of 1933. He voted Nazis, and he voted to put Nazis into power. And he was anti-Semitic. He did not like Jews, which was a pretty common theme at the time. And a lot of what Hitler was saying, a lot of what the Nazi Party was pushing, he agreed with. Now, where he had problems with the Nazis was actually, it's funny because he didn't have problems with the ultranationalism. He did not have problems with anti-Semitism.
Later
He
in
didn't
life,
have
Niemoller would
problems
come
with,
to regret to the fact
more
that
of their
he did not spend
eugenics
more
and
time
stuff and
speaking
things
out
like
against
that.
the human rights violations
As a
of
matter
the
of fact,
Nazi
he even
Party.
said, I didn't have any political disagreement with Adolf Hitler. All of his disagreement was spiritual or religious. And where he really started to get upset from Adolf Hitler was Hitler and the Nazis trying to meddle in church affairs. And specifically when the Nazis and Hitler started saying that anyone who was non-Aryan could not be in church leadership, could not be a pastor, could not be a teacher or a professor, and Niemoller felt like that was going too far. Now, it's interesting because Adolf Hitler really used religion, and many people in Germany in the 20s and 30s who felt like Germany had gone away from its roots and from its glory days, a lot of people, when they heard the Nazis come about, they really felt like the Nazis were going to bring about a Christian revival in Germany. They actually felt like Nazism was going to strengthen the church and strengthen Christianity.
They even said that
interesting
Hitler
because,
was an instrument used by God.
They did in some ways, but it wasn't true Christianity. It was their own dogmatic, white supremacist, ultra-nationalist version of Christianity. And when Hitler and the Nazis could no longer use the Lutherans as much as they would like, this extremist nationalist group came about that was pro-Nazi called the German Christians. That's capital G, capital C, German Christians. It was an actual group. So I'm not talking about just generally speaking the Christians who lived in Germany. They embraced radical Nazi ideology. They embraced this anti-Semitism within the church. And Niemoller, even though he was an anti-Semite, believed that that wasn't right, that Jews who converted to Christianity should still be allowed in the church, Jews who converted to Christianity should be allowed to be preachers, even if they came from Jewish families. They should be allowed to be professors and teachers and things like that. And so it's interesting because Niemoller actually had opportunities to meet with Adolf Hitler and Nazi leaders. And he realized that things were not going to go his way. And he actually worked with others at the time to create something called the Pastors Emergency League, which would come to be known in a later version as the Confessing Church. And the Confessing Church was the church that stayed true to Christian ideals during the time when the Nazis controlled Germany. And so Niemoller was trying to keep the church true to the teachings of Christ, and he actually was hoping that Nazism could be compatible with the church, and he found out that it actually couldn't. And so he actually met with Adolf Hitler in 1934. And he met with Hitler along with a couple other church leaders, some bishops, and basically they went there expressing their concerns that the Nazis were getting too active in controlling church affairs. And they said, hey, run Germany, but leave the church alone. And Adolf Hitler said, no, that's not going to happen. And actually, some evidence came out that Niemoller's phone had been tapped prior to the meeting by the Gestapo, which was the German secret police. And Niemoller basically just goes crazy. And he's like, can't do that. So he realized that he could not work with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. And it's interesting because after that meeting, the bishops that met with Hitler, they actually signed agreements to be loyal to the Fuhrer. And Niemoller left saying, I'm going to oppose this guy.
It was then that Niemoller
and
realized
left,
Hitler was a dictator.
He was repeatedly arrested between 1934 and 1937, just over and over and over and over, in and out of jail, arrested. Finally, when he was released in July of 1937, he gets out of jail, and the Gestapo are waiting for him, and he is basically labeled a traitor to Germany based on his work with the Confessing Church and his work to keep the church free of Nazi ideology, or at least Nazi leadership. And he is arrested as a traitor. He is given a sham of a trial, and then he is sent to prison. Spends 7.5 months in solitary confinement, and then he was convicted in 1938 and shipped off to various prisons and eventually concentration camps. He would be liberated out of the concentration camps after World War II. The Allies came in and freed the concentration camps, obviously, and then he began lecturing all around Germany and other areas, and basically his goal was to speak out and say, hey, what was going on was wrong, and he was listing himself and other clergy and primarily German Christians. He said, we didn't do enough. We didn't speak out. We didn't do our part to stand up and speak out when all of these people were disappearing. And even though maybe not all Germans knew what was going on, not all Germans knew about the death camps, about, the ovens and the, mass murders, maybe they didn't all know about that, but he says, hey, we all saw these people disappearing all around us, and we were quiet, and our silence was complicity, basically. And so he goes out basically apologizing for not speaking out. Now, it's interesting because even though he spoke out and apologized for not doing enough, after the war, things came out about him, and he actually was sort of a controversial figure for a number of reasons during the 60s and 70s, and then he died later on. He didn't actually apologize for his own anti-Semitism until 1963 in a radio interview. And he said, I didn't like Jews, and I'm sorry for that. That's just, a paraphrase of what he said. So it literally took him decades to come to grips with the fact that he himself held those same beliefs and views that Adolf Hitler and the other Nazis held. Even though he knew that it was wrong, and even though he knew that the church, should not embrace that, it took him decades to realize that in his own heart. Something else that came out, afterwards is he actually did. He asked, after they arrested him in 1937 and threw him in the camps and everything, he asked twice in 1938 and in 1941. He wrote to the Navy, and he asked for them to put him back into the Navy so that he could fight for Germany. He also wrote in 1939 to a former colleague, and he asked the colleague to speak to the German officials for him to release him so that he could fight for Germany. And a lot of people are like, that's a little bit strange. I agree. I agree. The people that you realize are totally opposed to Christian doctrine and are wanting to not elevate or promote the church, but they're wanting to use the church for their own twisted ends. He says, hey, let me out and I'll help fight for you. That's problematic. But I think it's easy to judge someone then in that time and in that place based on our understanding and our ideology. You know, I mean, I come from the Allied side where my grandfather lied about his age so that he could go to war early, so that he can go and fight against fascism and liberate the concentration camps and things like that. So it's easy for me to judge him and say, this dude, he was messed up in the head. But, you know, something you've got to realize is this extreme national identity that Niemoller was raised with in the late 1800s, early 1900s, this very German understanding of duty to the state. And he said at one point, he said, you know, my soul belongs to God, but my body belongs to the state. And so as a German, he believed even though God saved him, he still was owned bodily by the nation of Germany. And so when they called you up to go to war, you went to war. And he actually said Germans do not do well with a lot of freedom. They do well, and these are his words, not mine. They do well with, you know, a very authoritarian structure of leadership. And I have to say, you know, I've known a lot of Germans in my day, and, you know, some of them have had very candid conversations with me. And, you know, I would say everyone that I knew of German heritage or descent, they knew that Hitler was a bad guy. They knew that the Nazis were bad. But they said, you know, if Germans are honest, they will say that, you know, when Germany was strong and powerful, those were glory days. Yeah, the way Hitler did it, the way the Nazis did it, that was wrong, but the strength brought great honor and glory to our nation. And when that's bred into you for generations, I'll tell you, for centuries, really, if you go back in German history, European history, when that's bred into you for centuries, that's very hard to undo. And how do we translate that to today? I think that we can say there are a lot of analogies to Niemoller and what he went through and what he saw and his own development of ideology, his own cognitive dissonance. He was raised believing his belief system was right, his nationality was right. You know, many of us in America were raised that way, to believe that. Think even in terms of Christianity. They believed that Christianity was the right religion, and not just Christianity, but, you know, the German iteration. I mean, they viewed Martin Luther as basically the savior of the world, you know, and his reformation of the church. A lot of Nazis rallied around that because that was, hey, you know, I mean, this Roman Catholic institution was trying to leverage us, and our guy, Martin Luther, a good German, went and basically, you know, kicked these people in the teeth. And so that was honorable for them. And so they had this nationalistic Christian heritage. And there was a sense of duty. You know, you grew up in America, especially in a military family, there's an extreme sense of duty. And if you've grown up in a military family, it's very rare that you would think that you shouldn't join the military. The more common thing is if you come from a long line of military people, you know, you turn 18 and you're like, you know, I got my card in the mail when I turned 18, my selective service card in the mail, and I'm actually thinking about just signing up, just joining. A lot of us did that and have done that. And so there's this identity within us that we're raised in, and it's very hard when that is challenged by external facts. And it's very hard whenever people that you view are good and doing the right thing begin doing the wrong thing. It's really hard to speak out against that. But here's the thing. The point of Niemoller's poem is this. Regardless of the difficulty in standing up and speaking out, regardless, it must be done. When our leaders are doing wrong, It must be done. We must stand up and speak out, even if that puts us at odds with what we perceive to be our heritage. Now, I want to tell you something. I am a citizen of the United States, and I am so thankful that I am a citizen of the United States. But I want to tell you, before being a citizen of the United States, I am a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, and I am a servant of Jesus Christ. And that supersedes my allegiance to any country, to any political leader. And I want to tell you that there are laws that I must follow, no matter what the laws of my country say. Jesus said the two greatest commandments are this: love God first, love your neighbors yourself. I even have it on this amazing hat right here. Love your neighbors. Love God first and love your neighbors as yourself. Friends, those are the primary commandments that Christians, even American Christians, must follow. And if you're wondering, who's my neighbor? Is the white American who lives next door to me, is he my neighbor? Sure. But you know what Jesus says when he's asked that question, who is my neighbor? Anyone who needs help. Friends, we are seeing tyranny in America today. And there are a lot of people who need our help. All those people are our neighbors. Doesn't matter their citizenship status, doesn't matter their religious status, doesn't matter their sexual identity. If they need help, they are our neighbors. And Jesus says, you must love them. I would encourage you, if you're a Christian, doesn't matter what your nationality, if you are a Christian listening to my voice today, you have a duty to stand up and to speak out, to speak against tyranny, and to love your neighbor as yourself, even if it costs you, even if it costs you dearly. Ultimately speaking, we're all going to be judged. And we are not going to be judged based on our nationality. We will not be judged based on our allegiance to a political party or a leader. We will be judged on whether or not we loved God first and loved our neighbors, those who need our help, more than ourselves. I hope you take these words to heart. I hope that you speak out before it's too late and there's no one left to speak out for you.